Alright, yo, what up? I just wanted to do, I don't know exactly what this video is going to contain, but I just wanted to do some quick clicking around inside of Ableton to show basically what you can do as far as warping is concerned. So if you go to, hold on, let me turn on my keycast. So this is just to remember, and give me one sec. This should be 2 maximum lines. All right, I think we're happy. So yeah, if you do control comma, that takes you into preferences in Ableton. All right, you can see what I'm doing. I'm gonna put this down here. And then what I wanted to show is that if you go to record, warp, and launch, I believe there is a auto warp long samples right here. Let me zoom in. So if you go to record, warp, launch, and then you check auto warp long samples, that might have been when Evan mentioned this in, I think, producer pathway. That might be the issue that he's coming across. And then, but personally, what I like to do is not auto warp at all, because I typically just want to do all the warping myself. So, and then this stuff, whatever, it probably doesn't matter too much. And then as far as the default warp mode, for me, like the last 10 years, I've just always had it set to beats. So for me, beats is the proper default, but it can be whatever. I'll kind of walk through that. But essentially, we've got, let me grab just something real long here. Okay, so we got a Duke Ellington album right here. So if I, well, hold on, let me go to this, turn on auto warp long samples, and when I drop this in, well, I think it's kind of confusing it. A lot of times if you bring in like a really long drum sample or something where it can really tell where the beats are, then it will actually, there we go, this is what I'm talking about. Okay, so if you have auto warp long samples on, this is what it's going to do. It's going to drop warp markers in for absolutely everything all along the clip length. So, and then just to be totally clear about what I'm doing, I dropped this file in, and then when you double click up here, this is like the header of the clip. This whole thing is called a clip. Whoops. This whole thing is called a clip. If you split it using Control E, now you have 2 clips. Split it again, now you have 3 clips, etc. So, yeah, if you double click on that, it will take you to this like settings screen or settings window, settings view, I guess you would call it. So down here, it will show the exact same waveform that you see up here. And then you'll notice if you were to like cut this and then move it, and then I go here and click up top here to zoom out, you can see that all that stuff is still there. It's just keeping track of where the start and the end points are, right? So this section right here that I have highlighted is the same thing that I have highlighted down here. And then for this one, it's the same thing. This guy, whoops, this right here is the same as this up here. However, you can also, you know, like duplicate this, and now you have two separate clips that are identical. So you could change this one to do this, and then this one to stay like this, or you could crop this one down here, copy and paste it, right, etc. So hopefully that's all making sense. You might already know all this, but that's basically what a clip is. So every block that you can pick up and move on the arrangement view is a clip. And then when you double click this header up here, it takes you to that clip's settings down here. And then another helpful shortcut is Shift Tab. So if you have, you know, like a bunch of effects down here, then when you do Shift Tab, it'll switch to the clip settings view, and then when you do Shift Tab again, it'll take you to your effects, and then Shift Tab will take you back here. So for each channel, there's actually two different views. One is the audio effects view, and the other one is the audio settings view. I don't know exactly what this is called, if you couldn't tell, but yeah, so essentially, if you have auto warp long samples enabled, then when you drop something in, it will automatically drop warp markers at certain spots, and it'll attempt to warp stuff for you, but honestly I don't think that's a great idea, because it can take forever to undo the things that it did. It can take a lot longer to undo what it did rather than just punching it in yourself. It can be a lot quicker that way. So if you go control comma and then auto warp long samples, now when I drag this guy in, it will, you'll notice, just put one warp marker here at the very start, and that's what this yellow thing is. I think that depending on the theme that you have enabled, this will be a different color. So it could be green, it could be whatever, orange, but I'm just using the theme that has yellow warp markers. So you can turn warp off altogether just by clicking this right here, and then when that happens, now you no longer have the option to add any timing changes here. It'll just mess with it'll manipulate the audio without changing anything. So if you're having some weird warping stuff going on, you can just disable the warp right here, and the timing will be set back to where it was. But since I have auto warp long samples off, it didn't actually do anything. It just put a warp marker there at the start. So now if you do want to warp something, let's make this a lot shorter so that it's not so tough. By the way, Control E is how I'm splitting these. And then you'll notice that all this stuff is still a part of the clip, so you can slide this to reveal it, but it's a little harder on your processor for it to remember that all this extra stuff is there that you don't really need. So you can crop it by doing right click and then crop, okay, and then that will cut everything here. So you can notice I can't zoom out anymore. So now the entirety of this clip is shown, right? So I did a crop there. The other option, I actually don't do crop most times. I do consolidate, which is Control J. And consolidate is similar to crop, but when you do this, it actually normalizes the clip. And if you're not sure what normalizing is, basically it takes the loudest spot of, yeah, if you're not sure what normalizing is, basically it takes the loudest spot of this clip, which is probably like right here, you know, this spot right here, and then it bumps everything up so that that loudest spot hits the top of the clip window. And this is what I was talking about when I mentioned a clip window. And you'll notice, right, so after I consolidated it, it changed the volume, it changed the alleged volume, right? So it didn't actually change the volume. What's the best way to put this? It didn't actually change how loud this is coming out of your speaker, right? So like this, and then if I consolidate, it's the exact same waveform, right? Check this out. So it's the exact same waveform. However, when we look down here, you'll notice that according to Ableton, this clip is actually turned down by 10.5 decibels. Rather than being at 0, it's actually, Ableton is thinking that this clip is 10.5 dB lower. So if we bring this back up to 0, this is called normalization. So basically just taking the loudest piece and setting that at the top of the clip window. And you can go above the clip window too. Like you could do something like this, but then you're probably going to get some clipping, which means when it goes above 0 dB. So in that scenario, you would want to add a limiter or a compressor, probably a limiter, or just don't do that. You don't want to clip. Usually you don't want to clip. It's a really good rule of thumb to not clip. However, sometimes you can use like that, pushing it really hard into the limiter or into a sound goodizer or a color limiter. You push it really hard into that to where you would be clipping, but since it's limiting, it's bringing everything back down to 0 dB. And it just sounds like it's being pushed really hard through the limiter. But it's not actually like degrading the audio signal, or pushing it so hard that your audio driver can't handle it and it's just like breaking apart. So anyway, I think I got a little distracted there. But basically, I consolidated this, so now this clip is normalized, and we can see that down here when we set this to 0 now. So again, I can press warp, I can turn warp off, and it will not do anything to the track, and it also won't let me do anything to the track. I can, however, adjust the start, so I can change this down here, right, and I can also change the end right here. This top one is for looping, but you can't actually loop a clip unless you're warping it, right? So one thing that really tripped me up when I was getting started is I was like, normally sometimes this will let me pull this past this and it will just keep looping it over and over. Why is it not doing that? And the reason is because warp mode needs to be on, right? So down here, warp mode needs to be on, and then you also need to press loop. So once warp mode is on and you've pressed loop here, now check this out, you can drag this beyond the end of the clip, and you'll see right, it's kind of hard to see, but there is a little, there's a little loop marker right here showing you this is the end of the first loop and the start of the second time it loops. And you could do that, like you could just keep going all the way out here, You could loop this as many times as you want. And this is a lot more helpful. Like for instance, this is 35 minutes of a loop, but what if we go here and choose like whatever this is. Turn this down a little bit. Okay, so like what if we wanted that right here? Boom. We can delete that, and we go here, Control E again, delete that, and then now we have just this. Right? And then since we did that, you can see it's still holding on to everything outside of the visible region. So we want to get rid of all that either by cropping or by consolidating, Control J, and both of those will get rid of everything outside of the visible region. If you have something like this going on where it's a little confused right now, I think because it's not on the downbeat. Whoops. It's not on 12 right here. So what you can do is click this, which is changing the start point of the region. You can right click that and set 1.1.1 here. And that's pretty helpful for moving the yeah, like the way that it's thinking about it is like the clip starts right here, or the downbeat starts right here, and then the audio starts. But we don't want that. We want the audio to start right at the downbeat. So that's more of a technical thing. It's one of those things that'll kind of just like pop up, and you're like, oh, okay, I see why that is an important thing to know. Even though right now, as you're watching me do it, it's like, you know, maybe why is that even, why are you even bringing that up? So anyway, back to looping. Now we've got this little guy here. And this isn't going to loop perfectly, but if I, by the way, this is responsive, so if you drag it down here, then it appears like this, right, side by side. If you drag it up, then they start appearing on top of each other. You can also collapse these windows, clip, audio, envelopes. So if you go to loop here, and then you start dragging this, now it'll loop this over and over as long as you want. Cool. But the thing is, you can see, or you can hear that it doesn't loop perfectly, and that's where we actually want to start applying some warp markers and making it loop nicely. So what I like to do is I'm going to say that I want this to, hold on, let me turn on my metronome. Yeah, let's see how that sounds at 120 BPM. Or actually, you know what, I'll show you this way. So if I have warp enabled and then I start dragging this, then you'll notice it actually follows the speed that this plays follows the tempo that I set. And I can do a lot slower. I can do a lot faster. Okay. So once you have warp set, it will adjust based on the tempo that you have right here. But you need to make sure that it's warped the way you want it to, so that when you start adjusting the tempo, it's actually locked into the grid already, rather than, you know. And you know, I gotta say, like, this stuff it's kind of weird. It's like explaining, I don't know, how to play Minecraft or something, where like you can explain to someone all the technical pieces of it, but that person really needs to hop into Minecraft for hours or days or months before they start to like understand it differently. Not just in like the technical sense of like, oh, I see, you need two string and or yeah, you need two string and three sticks for a fishing rod, versus explaining to someone like you might explain to someone how to fish in Minecraft, and you're like, the bubbles will start moving towards your fishing rod, and you're like, what does that even mean? The bubbles will start moving towards the fishing rod. And then once they start fishing for quite a while, then they're like, oh, okay, it's like part of my muscle memory now. So a lot of this stuff is the same way. Like me describing it or anybody describing it is probably just going to sound complicated, and it even feels a little complicated to describe. But the idea is that once you spend plenty of time just clicking these things and messing around with things, you'll end up being fluent in it, even if it's also difficult for you to explain what you're doing. Like I've been working with this crap for like 10 years now, and I get what I'm doing, but sometimes putting it into words is difficult. So anyway, I got distracted again. But so I think the next thing that we wanted to do was we need to make sure that this is locked to the grid, so that as we adjust the tempo, it's already locked into the grid rather than needing to adjust that later on. So before we have the warping done, we need to figure out where we want our tempo, our original tempo. After this is warped, we can bump it up, we can drop it, whatever. It'll automatically start warping. By the way, if you don't have warp enabled, then you'll notice this changes the clip. So the length of the clip is exactly the same. It's just the tempo underneath that's changing, and so it makes it look like the clip is longer, but it's actually just because the tempo is happening faster. Right? So those are the exact same because warp mode is not enabled. So once we have warp mode enabled, then it's going to start adjusting this clip based on the tempo. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. So let's set this to like 92. And what I like to do, actually, you know what? Let's yeah, let's just say that we want that to last 1 bar, which would be somewhere around like 128. I don't know. A lot of this is experimentation, so or let me make it a little shorter just to demonstrate this. So we'll do 97, and then what I like to do personally is highlight the entire bar here, and then I do Control J, consolidate. So now this clip has the audio that we were already looking at, plus a little bit of silence at the end, so that this clip takes up the entire bar, right? And now what we can do is start adding our own warp markers and actually dragging this around, right? So right now there's just the one warp marker, and if warp mode is enabled, you have to have one warp marker. You can't get rid of all of them. But if I like place one right here, now I can get rid of this first one. And then I can also set this warp marker right here, right click, and then again I can do set 1 1 here. So now you'll notice what happened. It dragged this whole thing to the start right there. Okay, and that's what I want. I think I'm actually going to drag this a little bit off, so like right there, so that we can get the start of it too. And now we need to, let me consolidate this one more time. So now we've got 1, 1, 1 there at the start, and then this is the end of the bar over here. So next thing I would do is just take the very end, add a warp marker here, and then start dragging to the end. And then you would drag the stuff in the middle as well. So you could move this like over here. And then maybe this one right here. Or maybe I don't like that. Maybe I want to drag this one right here. And I think I want to drag this back a little bit. And, you know, this sounds a little choppy, you'll notice. Oh, I just realized you can probably hear that through my mic as well. Hopefully that's not too bad. But anyway. So now we've got a loop that actually matches. No, we don't. One more time, let's consolidate. And then, by the way, when you consolidate, it will remove all of your warp markers, which can be really helpful. So again, I'm just going to put a warp marker here at the end and drag that so that it takes up the entire clip here. And then I can select all this and then do Control L, and it will loop this. Okay. Still not a perfect loop, but that's okay. And by the way, the reason this loop is disabled, that just means that we can't keep dragging this out. It's just going to, it's just going to stop at the end. So if I do loop here, now it will actually loop it for us the way that we had it manipulated here at the start. And next thing we can do, so you'll notice that that's kind of choppy there at the end. So the reason for that is because we have beats set as our warp mode, and I won't really get into these, but I will say beats is more for like rhythm and percussion, so it creates that like choppy sound. And you can change, like for instance, you could change it so that it is a 16th note. Then you'll also need to change this to this guy right here, and then start dropping this. So that's pretty cool. The lower this is, the less sound it'll actually drop, let through. And then once it's at 100, you won't hear a difference. And then you could change this to quarter note. Could change it to 1/32. And then usually when you start doing this stuff, you need to bump it up. Cool. But usually this will be set to transients, which means that every one of these large spikes, that's what it's looking for. Set that back to 0. And then the other warp modes that are worth talking about, well, they're all good, but they all have, like, they all play a different part. So repitch will take into account where the tempo was when it started, and then it'll adjust the pitch based on how much you are warping the sample. So it's on repitch right now, and if I speed it up, it'll pitch it up. If I slow it down, it'll pitch it down. And then pitch it down. And this is me just changing the tempo. The project tempo up here in the left. So you can do some really moody stuff. Whatever. And then these two buttons are also worth noting. This will make your sample happen twice as fast, and this will make your sample take twice as long. So you can do some real quick adjusting there. So that's pretty cool. And then complex just works well for like vocals and stuff like that, but you'll figure out your own preferences for each of these. Yeah, and then basically that's it, I think. You can move this all around. Yeah, just, you know, weird stuff. And like I said, I've been working with Ableton's like warp modes and warping tracks for like 10 years now. And now I feel very comfortable with it. Like if you ask me to do a particular thing, I'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, you just gotta, let's see, let's bring all that out and then turn off loop so that that's not messing with us. We gotta unwarp this so that it's the original. Oh no, actually I want to keep the original, so let's go back to where it was, and then we want to keep this guy, we want to keep this waveform, but we want warp turned back off, so we actually need to consolidate this and then warp, and then now we can I want this to last the whole measure, so let's do this. And I don't want to move anything over here, so I'm going to set a warp marker right here and then just pull this whole thing out. You know, whatever. Like, basically what I'm trying to stress is that you're going to need to take time to you're going to need to take time in the program to figure out what you're actually doing and how to get your workflow down. Basically, you're going to be confused for a while, and that's normal, because these are all, like, even like I said, just explaining this stuff is difficult, but I understand it intuitively. I understand what all is going on down here, but it's difficult to like tell somebody else what's happening. So anyway, this video is quite long, so I just I'm gonna cut it right there, but if you have any questions, just let me know. If there's anything I can explain better or go back into depth on, I would be 100% willing to do that. All right, peace.